AI is changing the way we work, think, and create, but how do we approach it with the right mindset? What does AI implementation really look like for businesses and individuals? Today, we are diving exactly into that topic, deep into the world of AI, with an expert who's on a mission to make AI accessible, practical, and transformational. Stay tuned for a fantastic conversation on automation, processes, privacy, and security, as well as responsible use of AI and the future of work.
Welcome to the Events Demystified podcast, where we demystify the world of in-person, virtual, and hybrid events, AV production, and AI technology by sharing practical tips, tricks, and strategies to help your event succeed. This podcast is brought to you by Trefan Events, a woman-owned boutique event production agency that caters to event professionals, small business owners, and entrepreneurs. We specialize in AV and AI education, integration, automation, and implementation, all based on our Fit for Events framework, which focuses on futuristic AV production, innovative AI technology, thriving audiences, and empowering behind-the-scenes teams. And I'm your host, Anka Platon Trefan, with over 2 decades of hands-on experience in event production, event management, and now AI technologies and cybersecurity.
Welcome, friends, to another episode of the EventsDemystified podcast, where we demystify AV, AI, and leadership with a holistic focus on fit for events wellness for event professionals, business owners, and entrepreneurs. I'm your host, Anka Platon Trefan, and I'm excited to welcome today's guest, which I can't wait to tell you all about. Noah Riley, the founder of AI Genius Automations, is a visionary in AI automation dedicated to making AI understandable, accessible, and impactful for businesses and individuals. Through AI Genius Automation, he's leading the charge in AI implementation and helping clients harness the power of artificial intelligence to streamline processes, improve efficiency, and create more time. What sets Noah apart is his ability to make AI concepts digestible and engaging for all audiences. His belief in AI transformative potential drives his passion to educate and empower others in the space. Beyond his expertise, Noah has a creative background as a former graphic designer, a love for strategic thinking through chess, and a passion for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Without further ado, let's welcome our guest to the show. Welcome to the show, Noah. How are you today?
I'm good. How are you? Thanks for having me, Anka. I'm just laughing at the graphic that comes by. It's like,
It sounds like you were having a really grand time, just waiting for me to say all these words that you sent me, like this bio. Look at him, like being a
I
serious jiu-jitsu Brazilian
yeah,
master.
I need to shorten my bio for sure. It's ridiculous.
I love it. Well,
Yeah.
here's the thing. I'm excited to have you here. I don't know. Should we tell the story how we first met before we get into the actual serious talk about AI?
Yeah, do it.
All right. So I think it was a year ago. It must have been about a year ago at IBL's Business Builder Day.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I was speaking on AI, and I think you were in the trade show. I don't know. Did you have a session or you didn't? I don't
I,
remember.
I I didn't have a session. I just had a booth.
You had a booth, and I
Yeah.
was just checking out the other booths there, and I don't know how I came across your booth. And what did I say? Come on, remind me, because I have such a short memory.
You said you like walked up to the booth. You didn't even say hi. You're just like, you do AI? And I was like, yeah. You're like, I do AI.
Asshole.
I was like, okay. And that was it. That was how I met you. And then someone was like, who was that? I was like, I don't know. And then someone else was like, oh, she's doing a presentation on AI. And I was like, okay. So I actually did have someone man the table for a while so I could go and check out your presentation. And they were like, what do you think? Is she a fraud? And I was like, no, she's actually knows what she's talking about. That's which was really shocking at the time and still just a lot of dilettantes, a lot of people who are just kind of riding the hype wave, but they're not testing anything. They don't have any knowledge
Yeah.
or background in it. They don't understand it. They're just kind of talking about it. And that was when I saw your presentation, I was like, oh, she actually knows what she's talking about.
Well, I appreciate that because I came at you the same way, like with a little bit of skepticism, I would say. Like, who's this young guy that seems to say that he knows about AI just because he uses computers or something?
Mhm.
Because there's a lot of
Yeah.
people that could come at it as, yeah, I use AI. I know AI, right? So, and then it's like, okay, so what do you know about AI? And then you're like, I don't know, I just use it to write, I don't know, a content piece or something, or to rewrite my emails or something. I don't know. So anyway,
Yeah.
I definitely like to test the same way that probably you do too. Whoever says that, okay, so what do you know and what exactly is your belief system around it, and
Yeah.
what are you actually knowledgeable of? I come at it the same way. It's like a little like hard at first,
A little.
testing grounds, just a little.
I didn't even know that you weren't really mean until like this last year at Boy Scout Entrepreneur Week when I actually met you and talked and sat down and talked to you. And I was like, oh, like
I
you're,
came
I thought,
and met you and sat down and talked to you. And I'm like, no, I'm a decent people. I'm actually a really friendly person. Sorry to have like totally scared the shit out of you. But guess what?
no,
I really appreciate what you're doing. So that's why I came. I think it was, what
was
event
it the,
was at Jump?
it was the Boy Scout Entrepreneur Week.
That's right. Yeah. And honestly, I barely made it towards the end. And my whole intention was just to come and say hi and have a conversation with you because I was curious where you're in your journey. It's not an easy journey, right? So I've been on it for a little while and I know that it has ups and downs. So knowing that the direction that I was taking AI was different than yours, I was like, why don't we just partner? Like, we're not fighting for the same like meager sessions here.
Yeah. And there's plenty of, I mean, it's so new. There's so much room. When people are like, I want to do what you do, I'm like, great, do it. Like, I'm not
Yeah,
mad.
because you're gonna have a different point of view, you're gonna have a different perspective, and there's only one Noah Riley, there's only one Anka Trifan. So I honestly believe that everyone that brings something to the table that is unique to themselves, they should 100% pursue whatever it is that they want to do. So let's start with our conversation here. But I
Mhm.
actually had a different icebreaker. I guess we just got carried away here because I love the fact that you are active and you have like such a diverse set of skill sets and interests, graphic designer, chess, jiu-jitsu. And I'm curious, if you had to compare an AI implementation to any of those, which one would it be and why?
Between graphic design, chess, and jiu-jitsu.
Sure.
I think chess and jiu-jitsu are basically the same thing. One's on a board, one's with your body. So let's just say chess because maybe better known. But yeah, the AI implementation game, it's kind of like watching a really cool tactic or a really famous game where someone
Mhm.
does something really cool with their pieces and then going like, wow, like, yeah, I could do that. No, you could not. Like, there are so many levels to the game. Like as soon as you think that you're incredible, you go and find out that there's still so much sky ahead of you. AI implementation is still challenging because at the end of the day, when you try to move AI from being outside of a system to inside of a system, no matter what that system is, you will get to needing deeper and deeper amounts of technical knowledge, the more streamlined, the more automated you want it to be. And I think that because we see a lot of kind of YouTube videos and we read a lot of articles about some individuals who build some very specific system that's like a large automation or solves a large problem, that doesn't mean that it's going to be easy for you to replicate it. That also doesn't mean that it's going to be good for your use case. I mean, it's a tool. And I
Yeah.
think that people are really excited about the tool without understanding what problem they're trying to solve. I think that it's really important. I wish people would reverse their thinking and be like, first, what are my problems? And I was like, can AI solve these problems? Because right now it's like people are like,
Hmm.
I want AI, and then they turn around and look for a problem. It's like
Right.
you don't just give somebody a hammer because everyone's like, everybody has a hammer. I'm like, what are you gonna do with it? I don't know.
Everything is a nail, right? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
instead of that, be like, what is the problem you're trying to solve? And there's a lot of depth
Hmm.
to how good you can make it to your tool choices. And then, yeah, like, what is the system going to be like? Is this
Mhm.
a piece of software? Do you have to integrate with other pieces of software? Are you building something that people have to sign up to where they're going to be passing like some kind of sensitive data to you? If so, is it a contract? Do you know how to handle PHI, like personal information, sensitive information? Like, even those very simple things, even that small list of questions, that's enough for like 99% of people to be like out of the game in terms of building a really robust AI system, which means you only have a few options left, right? Like you can go to the pre-made tools and use them and then take whatever output they give you and then put them wherever you need them, which is where a lot of people are.
Well, I have a funny story about chess. So my 8-year-old daughter, she's actually pretty good at chess. I cannot say that I am because I haven't given it much time nor interest. But I think we were vacationing somewhere at a hotel and we needed to kill some time and they had this chess board, right? So my daughter's
Hmm.
like, play chess with me. I'm like, baby, I don't know how to play chess. I'm like, I'll teach you. I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna take ChatGPT and I'm gonna play this thing against you because you're 8 and I'm so much smarter and I also have ChatGPT. She still beat me. So I guess if you are planning to really get good at AI, know that there's still limits. It might not
Yeah.
necessarily help you in your chess strategy against an 8-year-old that really knows what they're doing. So yeah, that's my
It's a good
humble
start.
story there, and which only goes to say there's room to grow for all of us. Like neither of us reached the point where we know everything, and I'm super excited to have this conversation because you definitely went at it like hard from the get-go. So before we even get to how you help businesses and individuals embrace AI and automate the processes and whatnot, let's give our audience a bit of a synopsis into who you are and how you got here, and professionally, not physically, because you're, I think, get killed.
Yeah.
And anything that will give us a little bit of a background on you, knowing that my audience is particularly interested in AI, but they also come from different backgrounds themselves. So let's start with that.
Yeah. I mean, I come from kind of the world of graphic design. I think that was my first professional kind of journey into tech, but I've been a nerd since pretty much I was born. There was never a time when I wasn't breaking things apart and putting them back together and trying to figure out how everything worked. I remember when we got our first computer, the only thing I wanted to do was just be on the computer and figure everything out. I was like, what does this button do? What does this button do? From when like very young. And that trend kind of continued through my life. I wasn't getting formally educated until I was in my early 20s. And I went
Mhm.
back to school for computer science and graphic design. And I went to Keene State College. I went to in Portland State and tried to get a degree or something because I just figured this is the area that I want to be in. And then ultimately ended up deciding that it was too slow, that I was felt like I was wasting my money because I just was constantly like being held back by other people in the class who don't learn as fast, and the teachers were kind of like, this is the assignment, and I was like, ah. I asked them questions, they're like, I don't know, and I'm like, why am I paying you? Like,
Why am I going that for
I
you?
was like, what am I doing? Like, and I kind of came to the conclusion that like I can learn faster on my own, and
Mhm.
so I dropped out. And then shortly after that, I started to pursue a career in graphic design. Then I got sidetracked, did a whole bunch of things. I was a paralegal and I was trying to do the fighting thing for a while, and then got a really bad injury that took me out for good, pretty much, as far as like it being
Mhm.
a profession. And then, yeah, I got into the graphic design game for a long time. And then I took my nerd skills there and read every single reference manual for every single Adobe product, every single page, memorized all of the hotkeys, and then became this ridiculously fast graphic designer, and then started building automations inside like the programs so that I could make the processes faster. And that was where I started to shift from being like
Mhm.
a graphic designer. Because even when I was the lead designer of the last company that I worked for, I was just building automations for our design team. I wasn't actually designing.
Mhm.
And so
That's when you
that's how I started.
found your niche. Like, I'm actually really good at this thing.
Well, so it was more that I was more interested in it. I was interested in the design part of the graphic design,
Mm-hmm.
like not from an artistic standpoint. The thing that really intrigued me about it and that held my interest when I did do it was the psychology of design. Not the actual making of the designs per se, but like the composition of it. And I was like, huh, these colors evoke these feelings.
The
And if I have this,
neuroscience behind it, basically.
yeah, like what makes someone feel? How does UX actually work? What is the path that your eye takes across a graphic, and how long does it take to get from one spot to the next? And then what's the most likely like series of like shapes, colors, and like eye path that will lead to the desired emotion that will lead to the desired output of clicking the next button? Like that to me was fascinating. That's the thing that I really nerded out on. But beyond that, what I really love more than anything is just like efficiency. Like I'm a time
Mm-hmm.
hacker. Like I just love making things be faster and better. So automation was kind of that's a given. As soon as I got my hands on starting to do like coding and like, oh, this is what I was always meant to do.
I love it.
So
You know what? I can see now why we're friends. Because this industrious part of you and like the nerdy part of you that started like playing with computers when you were 3 or whatever, when you had access to one. I was 5th grade. That's when I had access to my first like MS-DOS large CRT monitor, and just keeps like switching the motherboard and the graphics. And we didn't have any options back in the days. There's those white boxes, and then you could only upgrade the memory, either the motherboard, the memory, the hard drive. And I don't even think you could actually touch a graphic card back then. But definitely was like literally that was the trading that I was doing in 5th and 6th grade with other like nerdy kids. It's like, okay, so what can I trade you this memory for that memory? Because I want to build this.
yeah.
But then another interesting thing about what you just said, the neuroscience behind all of this, is I actually got into that around the same high school year age. My dad was a super curious mind, loved reading, and he had those huge manuals, like medical grade manuals about the science of the brain, and it was all about neuroscience, and it was all medical stuff. And I don't
Yeah.
know why, for some reason, like I had no desire to become a doctor whatsoever, but I was attracted to those like huge, big books. And just because to me it was fascinating how the whole brain, the way it thinks, the way we think, the way we analyze things and perceive things, and emotional and all the things, psychological. And that actually what drove me into lighting design later, like into AV production, how sound is connected to emotion, lighting is connected to emotion, all of that part. It wasn't so much necessarily, oh, I like to move buttons and I like to make beautiful sounds and I like to see pretty lights. It was more like, how does that impact us as humans, and how can we make this experience better, knowing some of the little things that we know. And I think we came such a long ways, like in the way we design events, for example, in the way we design logos, in the way we look at the whole holistic approach to any of those elements, because now we know more, because now neuroscience is actually a field that we pay attention to, not just in the
Right.
medical space, but also in the experiential space. That's what I think is like all these little things that we have in common. Now I see why we're friends. But it's interesting how everybody kind of takes their own journey to get to this place in time where at the end of the day, you kind of speak the same language.
Yeah. I mean, there was definitely that sense after the first time we met when you decided to not be mean anymore. And we were at Entrepreneur Week. And I was like, oh, we're both just nerds. Like, I get it.
Awkward
This is-
nerds, yes.
yeah.
The awkwardness, there's like don't even know how to talk to each other. They start like just punching.
Yeah.
I
That's
like
pretty
you.
much what it
I
was.
like you.
Yeah. It's like high school.
Oh my gosh. All right, let's get back to our AI conversation because this is super exciting stuff. So, we both
Mhm.
know that AI is no longer just a buzzword, it's a tool, as
Right.
you mentioned. But how do you think people should shift their mindset when they approach AI, talking about neuroscience, talking about perception, talking about all of those emotions attached to things that we sometimes fear?
That's a huge question. Without getting into the details of why per se, that's a huge question that deals with so many things about human psychology, our backgrounds, our religions, our own technical knowledge, and like the way that we were raised, our skill sets, our job. Like, I mean, like so many influencing factors on why we would look at new things and either accept them or reject them. But in general, I would say that, I mean, the thing that I always tell people is curiosity is greater than resistance. Like
Hmm.
resistance is kind of designed to protect our weaknesses. It takes a lot of strength to be curious because you might get burned, right? And I think that
And you might
we,
sound stupid, and who wants to sound
right,
stupid, right?
right. Yeah, it's the kind of like the willingness to fail, the willingness to experience like that discomfort, the willingness to go into something not knowing exactly what you're going to get out of it. I mean, in the beginning, I think there was a lot of justification for people being hesitant to get into the space and try to understand more about what's going on with AI because there was some kind of feasible possibility that it was a fad, right? That it would
Hmm.
go up and then go down. We're well past that. It's not a fad, it's here to stay. And I was like, now it's not like this is like the thing like email or the internet, where way back when people were like, I'm not going to use email for my business, or I'm
I'm
not going
just
to.
gonna send letters forever.
Right. We're kind of in the same spot right now where it's like you are not, this is not an option. Like you will be pushed into a very tiny corner if you are going to tell yourself or anybody around you like I refuse to use AI. Like you really won't have an option. Like you'll get to the point where it's so deeply embedded into so many things. It's kind of like saying I'm not going to have a smartphone. You can. And I was like, but it's like hard to get a job because you'll
Yeah.
go to a job and go to get hired and they'll be like, great. Be like, so go ahead and log into our app and this is how we track our hours. You know what I mean?
I-
Like,
I'm still gonna write them down. Here's my
right.
time card. Or
And
do people still punch things? Like, do they still do the punch card?
I think some places, I
Really?
mean, there's some like kind of just happily behind some whole entire industries that just kind of are very slow to adopt because they're
Yeah.
dominated by huge companies that are not innovating. Health is a big problem. Construction is a big problem.
Hmm.
Education, on
Yeah.
weirdly, like they're usually pretty slow to adopt new technology. And so, yeah, there are some industries that struggle more than others because sometimes, obviously, government, because of regulation or because of the size of the industry or the size of the organization, it's too hard to implement
Yeah.
across an entire organization. Whatever, there's a lot.
That's interesting. I just actually studied the McKinsey 2025 AI report that came out this week. I posted about it on LinkedIn, and it was saying basically that the AI gap is so much bigger than what we thought. Because while apparently there's like the part of their research, 90% of the companies that were planning to increase AI investments, only 1% believe that they've actually reached AI maturity. And while employees are ready, businesses, as you just said, like are super slow to act. So you might have 47% of those employees expecting AI to change their workflow and their whatever, the way they do things, but actually the companies are just not there yet, the businesses are not there yet. And then you have this like complete misalignment between where employees are versus where the business is.
Right. Yeah. And so, and a lot of organizations and like Gartner and stuff has studied this. Most of the time, it's bottom down integration more than top down. Like the employees start using it, and then it trickles up as opposed to down
Hmm.
because the business owners are a lot slower to make the change. They feel like the idea of the cost. They talk about. They try to go out and get like, well, should we get a team GPT account? Well, if we have 20 employees, that's going to cost us $600 extra a month. I'm not sure. What am I going to get from it? That kind of thinking, that
Yeah.
kind of hesitation super common for businesses. And that a lot of the businesses that I work with, they have already attempted to do something significant with AI, and they're still looking out and seeing like we know it can work, we don't know how to do it.
Yeah.
And that goes back to what we talked about in the beginning, right? Which is it's harder than you think to do like really detailed implementation. Taking AI from outside of an entity, outside of a system, and putting it inside of a system so that it works with your data the way that you want to, understands your processes, your people, your documents. Like those things are, that's, it's not as easy as you think. And I think that they're making a lot of strides. Some of the larger companies realize that it's a huge, people want that really bad, but it's a little bit of a slow journey because
Yeah.
everybody's business is so unique. The way that they do things, the people they talk to, the software they use, everyone's software stack is so unique. The way that they go about their processes is unique. The people that they employ and the people that they serve are unique. And so there doesn't seem to be this one size fits all yet. I think people are
Yeah.
trying, but
Hmm.
that's, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, to the mindset, I guess addressing the fear that a lot of people have, AI is not here to replace you, it's here to empower you. However, as you just said, implementing it effectively is a completely different kind of challenge altogether. And
Right.
sometimes AI's impact isn't just about implementation, then it's about disruption, because you're disrupting a whole way of doing things. We always done things this way. We've always used spreadsheets and Excel and Microsoft Office or whatever, which brings us to a recent, I guess, eye-opening case in which AI really has the power to disrupt entire industries. And we saw that with DeepSeek taking the US by storm, but then also its fall, right, triggered by cyber attacks. And that raised a lot of red flags because it goes hand in hand with why businesses and business owners sometimes can be very like guarded as to which solution, AI solution they want to implement, because there's a lot of talk about the data privacy and security, and what about AI security vulnerabilities, all those things, right? So I'm curious, how do you feel about that? I know you had a few posts on LinkedIn about DeepSeek. You're making some comparisons. So I want to hear your thoughts on that. Honestly, I stayed away from it, like just looking from the shore how this big
Mhm.
whale, it was gonna like devour
Yeah.
everyone. But I'm like, I am not touching this right now because it smells like trouble and most likely it's gonna be trouble.
Yeah, and that feeling is separate from the capabilities of the model, right? I
Mm.
don't really care what the capabilities of the model are unless they're so outlandishly better than other models that I'm like, okay, I know why I would use this now. Besides that, I just don't know why I would use it. I think people are really excited about it. Again, it's kind of like big shiny hammer. And I was like, do you have any nails? Like, no, I just want to hit stuff. I'm like, well, what problem are you solving? What problem does R1 solve? Their thing is like, well, we can use these significantly smaller models and get the same performance or almost as good as O1. But in my implementation, that's funny. On the way here, I got this long text from my senior dev, and he was like, R1 sucks. He's like, he's like, I just did a side by side with other models trying to code and solve the same problem, and it couldn't do anything. Like, he's like, it's
Mm,
garbage. And I was like, interesting. But
mm.
because there's so much nuance to this whole story,
Yeah,
like R1 is split into like 10 different models. It's not just one. And the one that that they're saying is like really amazing is still on their server. It's not the one that you're like downloading, but they're telling everybody like we built the one that you can download. It's just as good as O1, but the one that you download is not as good. Like it's
right.
not. So it's kind of a weird. You're right. It smelled weird. It was kind of. I looked at the thing and I went to the website and they're like, we're experiencing large scale malicious attacks right now. Our whole site is down.
It was interesting to me the fact that it was just in the last year, the people that signed up in the last year that were completely taken by this cyber attack, which makes me think, was it because a majority of those last year sign uppers were US based? And here we are with this
Mm,
cyber attack that's basically stealing everybody's information. And somehow it's only attacking the last 1 year subscribers. So many questions, so much to think about. And it's also fascinating and alarming, I guess, because it speaks to how quickly a groundbreaking AI tool can rise and fall, right? It's not
right.
just about one AI model, it's warning for every business and developer and organizations. If you're going to implement your entire workflow on a solution that you don't know if it's going to be there tomorrow, that's a huge red flag.
Yeah, agreed. Yes, you probably see this on LinkedIn. I say this all the time. I'm like, choose one of the major ones, stick with it. Like, you are not getting a lot by bouncing around. Even if OpenAI is better than Google and you choose Google, just stick with Google and get
Yeah,
really good at it. Once you get really, really good at it, when you bounce to another tool, you'll have like a mental context with which to say this is good for this reason or not good for this reason.
exactly.
If you don't get deep knowledge, like a conceptual knowledge, a really deep understanding of how these tools work, what kind of problems they solve, and how to work with them, you won't even know how to determine what's good and what's not. And if you
Yep.
bounce around, you get that deep knowledge. Like I would say, like choose one that you like. I go deep into GPT, but also when I go to test another tool, like I do this stuff so much that I can tell like really fast, like, oh, this is not good.
Yeah.
You
I
know?
am
And so
100% with you. Like I've been
yeah,
actually using ChatGPT just because from the get-go, from day zero, I
right.
got on it. And like, I don't know how to tell you this, but I try so hard to train other models like Gemini and even Claude and Perplexity
Mhm.
and Gork in the way I want things to be expressed, and not just in content, because I do write a lot of content, but also in the way I wanted to talk to me, the way I wanted to represent myself. And ChatGPT is my go-to, like my besties. I mean, at this point, it's turning into my therapist. The other day,
Yeah.
like it really was like mean to me, because literally, like a friend would be like when it tells you the hard truth and like it's not gonna BS around with you, right? I was telling it like, oh, here's like what I'm struggling and this is why I'm overwhelmed and blah blah blah, and it just puts me in the corner. And it's like, how about you do this and less of that, because based on all this memory history that I share, right? He knows everything. And I'm like, you know what? I need a minute to consider all those things you've said, because they've been kind of hurting me. So we have this like conversation where I'm like, wait a second, let me think about it. You might be right, but still, like, that was a little hurtful because you were so right.
It's kind of cool,
But
isn't it?
talking about the right tool for the right job, right? So
Right.
I'm also in the process of editing my book, which
Mhm.
I'm so excited. I really want to get it out and publish this year. So I tried to actually run this long manuscript of chapters. And I think like at this point, I'm like 80,000 words in
Mhm.
through ChatGPT, even though in sections, and try to edit and then try to analyze it. And I promise you, it did not do the type of job that I would have liked. But I went to Claude and I trained Claude to be my reflective writer in the way I want things to be, the way I want that text to sound and the emotions behind it.
Yeah.
And Claude is doing a fantastic job. And when I tried to recreate the same process, give it the same prompts, ChatGPT couldn't do that. Gemini couldn't do that. So Claude is my go-to when it comes to this creative, emotional, deep, reflective writing. Whereas
Yes.
everything else that I do is ChatGPT, a little bit of Gemini, but it's all based on the specific job, right? If I know what I'm going for, then I'll use this tool. Like the same way how you eat a bowl of soup, you're not going to get a fork. You're going to use a spoon, hopefully, right?
Right.
So you have a
Right. Right.
steak. You're not going to try to eat it with the spoon or something. Like, I don't know, like get the right knives. So
Yes.
that's what you're saying. That's, I think, what we're saying, both of
Yes.
us, because it's so important. That's why people like they have, oh my gosh, sometimes I see on those Facebook groups some questions that people pose, or I'm like, I can't. I got to move. I got to walk away. I cannot.
Yeah. There'll be people who will just kind of lag behind. You ask questions from the sidelines, so many questions that could be answered by just using the thing. I've
Yeah.
gotten in this habit now where if I do like a presentation and someone walks up to me after and asks me one of those kind of the questions that people who are really resistant ask, like, isn't this gonna make our kids stupid or something like that?
Yeah.
I'm like, pull out your phone. And I'm like, they'll be like, why? And I'm like, pull out your phone, download the app. Here's the correct icon. And he's like, oh, I don't want it. And I was like, then respectfully, like, if you're not good, if you're not willing to do anything to understand this technology, then you're not going to believe anything I say. You can download it right now in front of me, and we can use it together, and I'll show you,
Yeah.
or I'll move on.
Or yeah,
Like,
just
and
don't even argue with me. Why are you here
yeah,
arguing with
I was
me?
like,
Right.
yeah, the
Exactly.
people just, I mean, I get it. People want to be heard. They feel frustrated, but like, man, so much of that can be just completely done away with by just using it. I remember
Yeah.
the last time I did that with somebody and they actually did it, they were just like blown away. And they had the
Yeah.
same thing. They were like, I refuse to use it. And I was like, okay, then we have nothing to talk about unless pull out your phone right now. And she's like, well, I was like, pull out your phone, do it. And I was like, what's the most painful problem that you've dealt with recently? She said something, and I said, tell that to GPT. In that response, she started crying. And I was like, that. What did you
Yeah.
just experience? And I was like, do you feel stupid? Do you feel threatened? There's so much, you get so many of your questions answered by just using it because there's a part of it that is an experience. Like you were just
Yeah.
saying, like sometimes you talk to like a therapist. Sometimes you're asking a really technical question. Sometimes you're helping
Yeah.
write content. Sometimes you're like, it has such a versatile capabilities. And so many of the things that you would use it for are so specific to your life.
Right.
Like,
And
go
that's
for
why,
it.
to me, jumping in between tools and using different tools, unless you have a specific purpose for it, as I mentioned, there's certain things that I do with certain tools. Like stick with one model. I mean, not one model, but one LLM, and let
Yeah.
it do the job that it's purposefully made to do. And obviously I'm not saying it's not going to be perfect, because that's where the human oversight is necessary, and human thought process and thought leadership. But if you're just saying, well, it doesn't do a good job for me, and you gave it like one try or two tries, I'm sorry, but I think we need to have a different kind of conversation, or I need to point you to some of the workshops I've done way back when, where you need to like start watching those first, and then we can talk about this today, right? I
Yeah.
do have to highlight, though, I mean, there is something to be said about privacy and security, and there is something to be said about the fear that there is a lot of unknown and there's not a lot of regulations. What
Mhm.
do you think are some of the biggest privacy risks with AI today that you see?
I'm not sure that it's specific to the AI. It's probably just the companies who are
Mm-hmm.
hosting the AI, not necessarily the AI itself. A lot of these companies that have like an LLM or a large language model like ChatGPT, they do a lot in the background to mitigate the risk. And they actually have, if you read through some of how they do their data processing, they have algorithms that will scrub personally identifying information from the request before it hits their servers. And the reason why it'll give it a token so that when it gets back to the front end, it knows the thing that you were talking about. But you had to think like there's actually not any benefit to these companies like having sensitive information on their systems. And there's also like a lot of them have options to just like check a box and say, like GPT does, like don't train on my information. Some of
But do
them,
you
like I,
feel like that is taken seriously? I mean, sure, I checked the box, but
mm,
how am I going to pursue and see if they really enforce that or not? How can I tell, right? So is there a way for someone to say, well, I'm really afraid that my data is going to be used? And this is legitimate fears from, say, companies that deal with specific data of their clients, and their clients specifically might have said, I do not want you to use AI on any of our data. Our data needs to be protected and it has to be secure, and all those whatever implementations that need to happen. Is
mhm.
there one way in which you can protect yourself, or that's just wishful thinking?
I would say wishful thinking. Look at any big company, like look at Facebook. If you read through their privacy policy, they say in one part of the policy how amazingly secure it is, and then the other part of the privacy, like we sell and all every single piece of information, we own it, and we sell to third-party data. And if you actually do this, this is not a nice thing to do. But when usually people ask me the question, I ask them like, "Have you read the terms and conditions of every single app that you've downloaded onto your phone?"
Right.
No. Have the terms and conditions, the entire terms and conditions of any of the apps you have downloaded on your phone? No, you don't care about your data. We just have a new thing to target. Like it's AI. AI is unsafe for our data. I would pay way more attention to the company, not the tech. Like, because if anything gets compromised, it's going to be from the company. The technology that makes AI work, like deep neural networks, is it would not be easy to get to extract like a little like a droplet of water out of the ocean of information inside of an LLM. Not only that, there's a lot of scrubbing happening, and there's a lot of things to protect those kinds of things from happening even under the worst circumstances. But I would say that your worst case scenario is when you're tool chasing. You start to use some tool that you don't, you're like, oh, this cool new thing came out. And it's the people who made it. They're the ones a lot more likely to compromise your data than the AI technology. Does that make sense? I would be paying way more attention to the companies because at a certain point, we just have to trust them because we don't know. Yeah, I
Yeah.
can't audit OpenAI and I can't audit Google and I can't, even though they have all my stuff, I can't audit AWS. I can't audit Microsoft and they have all this information of mine. I can't be like, hey, show me where it is in your server. Like, they won't. So
Yeah.
like, how do we just have to trust at some point?
I think that question is mostly raised in enterprises and
Mhm.
in larger companies and agencies that really do work with certain clients. Let's say in the pharma world, where GDPR compliance
Right,
is absolutely it's like the Bible. You cannot
right.
not do with that. There's zero policy for non-compliance. So if all your clients are in that space and your stakeholders stakeholders are in that space, then obviously it is a priority for you. So then you're trying to figure out, how am I navigating all these AI tools everybody wants to use, but by our stakeholders and our clients, we are prohibited for even touching it, right? And honestly, you can track how many of the employees that you have use one tool or another and how they use it.
Yeah.
You can set an AI policy in place and you can give recommendations and education. But at the end of the day, you're not going to be able to track them unless you track every movement they make and every device they use. And all, last I checked, that is illegal. So
For now.
for now, right? So that's what I'm saying is, that's when the AI policy, privacy, security, ethics, all of that comes into play at such a level in which I don't think we're there right now to even have a conversation about it, because we don't have a solution. We don't have the grounds to make a promise. Just because you use this tool that said to tick this box, now you're safe.
I think that a lot of the people are just, they want recourse, like they want an option if something bad happens. They want to be able to blame somebody, right?
Right. Liability.
Exactly. So in that case, that's where these third-party certifications come into play. There are reputable sources that do your SOC 2 compliance and your GDPR and your HIPAA and all of that. They'll certify you and say, we checked, they meet this criteria. And oddly enough, the big players in the game, even though everybody's so terrified, almost all of them check almost all the major boxes, including OpenAI. They are GDPR, SOC 2, SOC 3. They have a very long list of third-party certifications for their data handling with the AI technology, not just as a company in general. And there's a lot of, but even when you tell somebody that, they don't go, oh, okay. They're like, because it's not even about, they don't, it's just like there's like a general distrust right now where
Yeah.
it's too new. Like
Mhm.
there's actually like the middle of the conversation. This is a very human thing. We're
Yeah.
just a little bit unsure of what's going on and how to approach it and what the next steps are going to be. I would say that in general, you're definitely losing a lot more by slowing yourself down. If I am a company, if I was another company, I would definitely be looking aggressively at how AI can help my systems, to help my processes, to make my employees' jobs and my job easier, to give a better client experience to my customers. And I will do my very best and due diligence to make sure that the data is handled securely and that we have good policy in place and that we're legally protected, and then move forward. Because right now there's like fear, 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 and then like stop. And I think that's
Mhm.
the big mistake.
Yeah.
Like be skeptical.
Regulation before education, I'm like a not fan of. And I
Right,
think,
we need
yeah,
to get
so
our
what,
hands on it first.
yeah, exactly. So now that we talked about mindset, we talked about
Mhm.
safe practices, I would like to dive into the practical side, because I know we barely touched the surface on the safe practices and there's so much more to talk about that.
I
But
know.
what I want to hear from you is, how then can you implement AI in a way that benefits businesses and individuals? Like, what's a structured approach that makes sense that businesses, individuals can take, and what are some of the customization options there?
Yeah, if I'm a business, I'm thinking I would definitely, there is a way to have a strategy that makes sense and actually move forward with it and see real progress if you implement the strategy, of course. The mental framework that I use is, you get through, there are 3 levels of benefit that you get from using AI. And the first one is awareness, because there are tools that exist that solve the problem you currently have, and you're not getting the benefit from it because you don't know it exists. And that's the only reason you're not getting a benefit from it. That's it. And then down, next step from awareness is your like workflows and optimization, which means that there are tools that you are currently using that don't talk to each other, which means that there's manual steps to transfer information from process to process. Or you're using really good software, but you're not using it very well. So you optimize your usage of the good software that you're using. And that's why I would say go deep rather than wide if you can, because it's easier to invest time deep and get a lot more out of a deep well than to be like skimming across the ponds. You know what I mean? And then your next level down is meaningful automation. And notice, like, the further you get down in this little process, the more technical knowledge you need to get more high leverage results. And so instead of looking at those super high leverage results and then be like, we can't get to those, I guess we're not going to do anything, like, work your way down the chain. And if you're a company, name your AI person, name them. Like, go to the person who you know is already tweaking out on it and saying like, I want half of your day to be this now. How can we use AI to improve these processes? We have this problem. You know this problem well. You deal with it every day. What kind of AI solution could we come up with? Just spend time researching, actually rerouting someone's time and giving them explicit permission to say, I want you to see how we can start to do this. And then they go out and start researching tools and testing things, and give them a little bit of company money to like test out a paid tool, pay for something for a month to see if it's worth it, take a few risks. Right now there's like a higher premium than normal on being adaptive and being able to take risks because the technology is new. After the technology settles and it's not as new anymore, like those qualities that will push you forward change as things stabilize. When things are unstable and there's unknown, you'll get more out of taking more risk. You have to kind of gauge your risk tolerance. So like if I'm a company, I'm saying, okay, cool, I get it. Like awareness, first step. So let me name my person. And I'm gonna say, okay, I want you to start finding stuff. Like what's out there? What are people doing? What's working? What's not? Get on forums, watch some videos, try some things, just start messing around with it and seeing how this technology can solve problems in our company. Maybe start with your job because then they have more of an incentive, right? And then after that, it's like, okay, that's really interesting. Can you make that do this thing over in Google Sheets? Because we use Google Sheets for this. I'm like, oh, okay, cool. And then keep setting them on the task. And if you're a solopreneur, do that yourself. It's hard. It's
Yeah,
hard.
it's hard, I think, to find the time, right? Because like if
Yeah.
you're a solopreneur and you're already doing all the jobs and wearing all the hats,
Mhm.
this is one extra task that unless you're very motivated by efficiency and productivity, as we talked earlier, you're not going to allocate time for it. And that's where you have all those people saying, well, I try it and it didn't really work, or it didn't really do much for me, because you did
Right.
not go deep. You just went somewhat like wide and it was too
Right.
shallow.
Right. That's why I definitely recommend pick one tool. And one of the reasons why I recommend GPT, and you could pick a different one if you want to, but it has so many capabilities in it. Like I still have stuff that I want to try that I haven't even tried. Like I do this all day, every day, and I still like it is deep well. So it's like if you want to like really dive in without having to be messing around with 20 different tools. Like, I don't know which one to use. Just go deeper and deeper. See, can GPT do this? Can I do this on the canvas? Can it handle this document? Can it make a document? Can it reformat my documents? Can it like just it
Exactly.
there's a lot.
I'm like, I
And
still want to use tasks at its like almost ability. And right now I have it like set up for a few things, but I'm pretty sure there's so much more to do with it. And I'm like,
oh
I
man.
just need to give it more task and more automation and more reminders, and not just imagine if that tool that was created specifically to replace your project management tool would do all the things that say Notion does, would do all the things that Asana or whatever else you use would do for you if you set it up right. But that takes
Yeah.
some time. That takes a little bit of like mapping. Okay, so what do I want
Hmm.
it to do? When do I want it to do? How do I want it to do? It's not just, okay, so go wild, figure it out.
Yeah.
Although
Yeah.
I wish
Exactly.
it did that, like knowing my patterns, knowing what I do, how I do it, when I do it. Can you just map that whole process out for me?
Man, oh, so there's there's so much stuff, Anka. I'm like bursting at the seams. I can't tell people fast enough like how many options there are. It's like when people you even all that little snapshot, I was like, oh, I could show you like 10 things right now that'll blow your mind, like as far as like project management or workflow or creating content or like there's just so much amazing stuff happening. And it's hard to keep up with. That's one of the
Do
reasons
you ever
I
feel overwhelmed?
no, I feel excited. I mean, I'm not overwhelmed, I think because,
Do you feel like people feel overwhelmed? So then why do you think they feel overwhelmed?
well, like I'm a nerd. I'm a tech, this is my space.
That
If I
excites you.
went, if I
But if
to
you
a, if
wouldn't
I
be
went to a
excited,
construction site,
yeah.
right, and someone was like, "All right, here's some tools. Aren't you excited?" I'd be
Here's
like,
all
"What
this
to
two
do
by
it?"
fours. Go and cut them and make something
Exactly.
beautiful out of it. And you're like, what? Come
Right.
on, you're a graphic designer.
But put that in the hands of someone who has 30 years of experience in construction and they look at tools, they see something different. They don't even look at it the same way. That's the same way that I feel about tech. It's the same way I feel about software. Like I'm not intimidated by it because to me, it's just like rinse, repeat. I mean, when I look at a web page, I can be like, oh, I can probably tell you how this is built in the background, what the code looks like, what kind of libraries they use, just by looking at it. And they're
Elementor.
different. Yeah, because they have, but it's because I boil in this space. So when I go to test a new piece of software, like I'm not getting intimidated, I'm getting excited. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. Oh, I wonder how this option works. Oh, let me see if this integrates with this. Let me, like, questions that some people wouldn't
Okay,
even think
let's
to
give
ask.
people maybe 2 or 3 examples, practical examples that
Mhm.
they can take away from our conversation. Because I think what's really hard, and I find myself struggling with that sometimes. Like, I have conversations with people, and they're like, "Okay, tell me how I can use AI." And I mean, that's such an open-ended question, and I
Yeah,
really don't even know where to start or where to dive into. So that's when I have to start asking questions to kind of get an understanding of what they're doing, like what they're using, what really do they want to solve, like the problem, going back to the problem, right? Because otherwise you're like, oh my gosh, what can't you not use AI for? And I don't even know where to start, right?
right.
So a general, let's say if you're a business owner and you struggle with time management, you
Mhm.
struggle with appointments, calendar keeping and blocking, and then maybe pipeline, you struggle with getting business in. Can you just walk through 1 or 2 routines that you feel like would be useful? Even though I know it's hard because like
Yeah.
mapping it out there with a tool is different than just talking about it. But just like brainstorming some kind
Mhm.
of maybe example or a practical example of what that might be for them.
Well, I would say, okay, because what I would like to do, because I'm assuming that I'm talking to people who are like not super technical, like they're not developers, they're just kind of like, I just have a business, I bake really good cookies or
Right.
whatever.
They've used tech, and I mean
Sure.
they think they know tech, but like you said,
Mhm.
there's a difference between a coder, a developer, and someone that uses it on the front end.
Right. Okay. So I would say for me, there's some of the most time-saving things that are a pretty low barrier to entry in terms of technical knowledge. You don't have to know a lot to get a lot from them. I would say that if you do content creation, for one, like if you, especially video, I think that Opus Pro is probably one of the best for anyone who's making long form, even not, it doesn't have to be long form content, just any video content of any kind, being able to record and then just have it upload split longs into a ton of shorts with animated captions and brand them and then spit them out and then schedule them on social media. That's amazing. That is an amazing time saver if you create a lot of content.
What
So,
if you're just someone that has a lot of admin work, lots of
mhm.
emails, and you're just trying to save some time from repeating that same process, sending the same email again and again, just in different words? Is
Mhm.
there some help we can give those people?
Yeah, the next thing I would say is custom GPTs. Get to know them. Like watch a video. It doesn't take very long to learn how to set them up. But even in that sense, you can say here, you can say in the instructions of a custom GPT, here's the template that I typically use. Here's the kind of information that I would want in a reply email. All I'm going to do is paste an email into, so that way you don't have to tell it what to do every time. All I want to do is paste an email and you're going to follow these instructions and then reply. So then that way you can literally just take an email right from where it is and then just pop it in. And then it'll just pop up your reply exactly the way that you want. It can have your name, it can have your footer, all that stuff. And then you can just put it right back into your email. That's one thing. But custom GPTs are one of the fastest ways to get really extraordinary outcomes because you can upload files to them. And that is a very underutilized in businesses. A lot of businesses have a bunch of information or standard operating procedures or something like where they're referencing a file and then they take that information and then they do something with it. Like you can use custom GPTs for that. It's really, really nice to be able to pull that information out or even Claude. So
And
I would
even
definitely recommend that.
Gemini with gems, I've actually experimented with that because now with the phone voice application on both ChatGPT and Gemini, I haven't used voice application on the other ones, but those are the two that I use it. Like with going back to the ChatGPT, private or not, but custom. If you want to go to the next level up, then you can custom make that to tie into your Google console to read your emails. So then when the last email comes in, you go on it on the phone and say, hey, can you reply to Noah and say, we have a podcast recording at 4, make sure that you're not late. And this is me saying that to the GPT. Obviously,
Yeah.
the GPT in the instruction manual has already the instructions. When Anka talks to you straight up like that, you're going to refine that and you're going to politely tell Noah, dear Noah, I
Yeah.
can't wait to talk to you and have you on my podcast at 4 p.m.
Yeah.
Please be on time so we can take full advantage of our time
Yeah.
together.
Wow. He really is. You sound like an AI.
See, I train my AIs really well.
Yeah. Jeez. Yeah, no, that's a really good example. And again, it's kind of like it's how deep do you want to go? It's like the higher
Yeah.
leverage activity, the more technical knowledge you need. So you can take a GPT, you can hook it up to Zapier, and you can have it set tasks, send emails, anything that Zapier can touch, which is like 8,000 applications, you can
Yeah.
do with voice commands in GPT. That's nuts. But like, how many people are going to take the time to figure out how to do that?
What they want, but you
I'm
know
not
what they
sure.
can do? They can hire Noah to do that for them.
Man, I sure could. But you can also like so here's I like to give people kind of a time frame. Like if you're a non-technical person, how long will it take you to actually do this? How long will it take you to do something like that? If you wanted to have a GPT that you could talk to, that you could have a conversation with, that had the ability to send emails for you, that would probably take you about a full day's work, like 12 hours.
It
Like
did
a
take me
full
like
day.
about a full day to learn how to code for the first time in Python and how to build this application that would do that for me. But guess
Right.
what? If a no coder like myself, I mean, I used to be a coder back in the days, but like who talks about C++ and Pascal these days anymore anyway, right? So it's like totally
No
outdated.
one.
It's like, remember when we were flying to
It's
the
like C++.
moon? Exactly. I was on that rocket. I'm like, okay, now we have SpaceX rockets and we're going
Yeah.
way beyond that.
I was like, I
Um,
just fly my drone there. Yeah.
exactly. So what
Yeah.
I'm saying is, if that was
Mhm.
possible for me to take the time, spend a Saturday, full Saturday to learn how to do that, and then deploy this solution for myself because I just got tired of like doing the same thing again and again the same way. What I'm
Mhm.
saying is, it's possible. You can do it. Yes, it was frustrating in the process because you do have to
Yeah.
reiterate and you have to correct and then you have to test and you realize that
Yeah.
you missed this or you forgot that or now you have to rewrite the code. There's so much more actually in the last 4 or 5 months, or I don't know, I think it was 6 months ago when I wrote code for that, that has deployed. Then now you can have ChatGPT within your coder so that it will watch your code and correct it right then and there. So you don't have to copy and paste to ChatGPT like I used to, just because my code wasn't right in the beginning, right? Until I had to figure it out. So
Yeah.
tools are developing with the same speed that those AI tools are coming on the market. So there
Yeah.
is necessarily not a lot of excuses if you have the desire to learn, if you have the curiosity to even know, you can do it.
I think people just need to understand that it's possible. Like the perceived likelihood of achievement, like if it's really, really low, like people will not go, like they won't move forward. And like I can tell you, like it is possible. Like you wouldn't get nothing, but you do have to be willing to like go through some pain. It will be hard. It will be harder than you think. But when you get on the other side of it, you will get what you came there for. It's not impossible. You're
Yeah.
not going to go towards nothing. It's just how long can you stay in that uncomfortable place where you haven't gotten back the thing that you wanted to get yet, and you're still trying to figure it out, and you don't know how long it's going to take.
Oh,
That's a
totally.
hard place.
I mean, it
People
took me
stuck
definitely a
there.
few gym sessions in between those breaking moments where I'm like so
Yeah.
frustrated that I'm either like punching my computer or I'm going to go and lift some weights and I'll come back at it with some fresh mind and
Yeah.
new energy. And then I figure out, right? But I was really like staying up at night a few times just thinking about it. I'm like, okay, so what am I doing that I need to like go at it differently? And if you are that curious mind and troubleshooter mind that will try to find a solution, you'll make it to the other side. There's no doubt that you will. And I think that's where this conversation is about. Like, be industrious enough and curious enough to try it. And if you do
Yeah.
hit a wall, here's also where the community comes into play. You go and ask Noah, you go and ask this friend, you go on some, I don't know, like forums, and ask
Right.
and like, hey, this is what I'm struggling with. Anyone run into this problem? Can you please look at this thing that I'm trying to build and I'm not getting to the end of it?
Yeah. Yeah, that's a great point, because sometimes when even if I'm having like a GPT or another AI system write code for me and I'm not getting what I want, I'll go back to GPT, I'll turn the web function on, and I'll say, hey, what are developers saying about this error? And then it'll pull up a bunch of stuff from forums where people are like, oh yeah, when I encountered this error, I did this, this, and this. Oh, I didn't think about doing that. Because sometimes when you're getting really deep in it, you got to expand out. But yeah, you will not be rewarded if you keep pushing forward. Like this, it's not a hype train. The capabilities are real. The time savings are real. This is an extremely powerful tool. Like I'm always encouraging people. I'm doing my very best to try to put more and more effort towards creating content that will educate people on which way to go, so it doesn't feel so overwhelming, because this is like the world that I live in. So that's why it's not overwhelming to me. I want to start to kind of help guide people towards those things. So, but
And that's what I think
it's
it's
early.
important to share. Like you said, like I even like when people share behind the scenes. And I wish I did more of that as I was struggling to some of my builds and my struggles. But then when you're in it, you don't think about creating content. When you're in it, you're thinking about solving the
Yeah.
problem.
Right now, not posting the errors.
Exactly. But that's where the
Yeah.
beauty and that's where the troubleshooting happens, when people can see the steps and then they can see where you got stuck, but then they can also see how you figure out the solution and your
Right.
process, like you're thinking process as you're going through all of those. I used to do way more of that actually with AV production. We were pivoting to virtual events and we were streaming on different, a bunch of new platforms, a bunch of new different systems, and putting it all together was kind of like reinventing the wheel in so many ways. So going behind the scenes and showing that, it was like a very good learning experience for a bunch of us that were in that space, in that community. So the same thing goes here. I can see the benefit of like just being able to go, hey, here's my goal, to build this automation. Let's see if it works. And you go through the steps and you do the things that you know that would work. And then you're like, oh, shoot, why is this not working right now? Right? So then you're
Yeah.
trying to figure it out. But even though, if you remove yourself and your ego from the equation because you don't want to look like you don't know what you're doing, but you put yourself in that educator mindset and shoes, then it's easier to walk through the process, make the mistakes, come to the other side with a solution, and not feel like embarrassed that, oh, it didn't go as smooth as I planned because I'm showing it to everyone, when we both know it's never not smooth. It's always going to
Mm.
be something to troubleshoot
Right.
somewhere. And whoever has an illusion that is just smooth sailing, you have not tried it for yourself.
Right. Exactly.
So let's give people one more example, practical example, where you saw automation in action that really made a difference for this persona that we built. Like if you're a business owner, you're spinning a lot of plates in the air and you're just trying to figure out how to do it better, more efficient, be more productive.
In terms of automation,
Automation, yes.
I mean, I would say choose a no code or low code tool like
Mm-hmm.
Zapier. And I recommend Zapier over the other platforms because of the number of apps that it already integrates with is far more than the other no code tools on the market. It is more expensive than them,
I was
but
gonna say, how does it compare with the pricing wise?
yeah, so if you use like a Make, for instance, like their main competitors, it's actually weird because Mike was smart. Their UI, like their user interface, looks really, really nice. It's much more appealing to non-technical people. They made it look really friendly, but it's actually harder to use and more technical than Zapier is.
Mm,
It was before they redesigned their UI to look so pretty, it was marketed as a no-code automation tool for developers. And so it's actually a lot more technical and more difficult to use than Zapier is.
interesting.
A lot of people don't know that. Yeah, just like the
Because I
language that it
actually
uses.
had the opposite experience. I tried Zapier and I just felt like it was harder to get a grasp of it. And then I
Probably because
switched
you're a
to
techie for.
Make. And then I just love to use Make. Like I mostly use Make. If I don't use Bardeen, I use Make.
Yeah.
And I had exactly the opposite experience on that. But also, I don't think I tried Zapier when it had all the latest automations or integrations. So it was a few years ago. I'm sure it's
Oh,
probably
okay. Yeah, yeah,
upgraded
yeah.
quite a bit since then.
Yeah, so one of the things, so I was doing the side by side where I was building in Make and Zapier at the same time, trying to build the same automations.
Hmm.
And
And this was
I
recent.
actually, yeah, this was like a few
Okay.
months ago. And I was doing them side by side, and I had picked 5 different automations, and every single one of those 5 automations, one of the integrations was missing in Make.
Mm. I would
Every single,
definitely agree with you
that
that
was,
Zapier has a much wider integration availability, inventory, if you may,
yeah.
versus Make.
Yeah, and Zapier kind of obscures some of the technical wording and stuff like that Make uses, and I'm really curious because I would love to hear this from like a lot of people who use Make. They really like it. It is really capable, but even the language that it uses are like coding terms, like sometimes. And so if
Hmm.
you're a not technical person, you're like, I want to use no code automation, and you go and look at those things, you don't even know. You're gonna
Right.
spend a whole bunch of time just researching what the terms mean,
It's
and
true. When
like
you
Zapier
go
doesn't even.
deep into the automation coding and the templates, you do have to know, have some sense of what the language is or what it means to be able to know what to do with that. It's like, okay, so what do I do here?
Right, yeah. And so that's another reason why, because I've had this kind of experience where I had someone who actually tried, they're like, I love Make. It looks so beautiful. And I built my first, like they used a template, right? And
Yeah,
then the next time they tried to build an automation with it, they were struggling. They're like, I don't
right.
understand. What does this mean? And they would show me screenshots and I'm like, oh, there's like 3 coding terms in there, right? And I was like, you're gonna go down a K-hole trying to like what, because one term is going to be defined with 5 more terms that you don't know, which will all be defined with 5 more terms you don't know, and then you're like going down that rabbit hole, right? And I was like, I'm not sure how to explain it to you. I mean, just put this over here. But
Yeah, I mean, I think the beauty is, as you said, for the developer, the coder that does need that kind of a customization at that
yeah,
level, where you can
yeah,
change this one code and then you get this output because you changed that one word, right? For your
yeah,
average user, unless you use the template, you're going to get yourself way down the rabbit hole trying to figure out what you're doing. And most likely, you're not going to build what you're hoping that you're building because you're going to break it in the process trying to figure it
right,
out.
yeah.
So there's pros and cons. So I'm curious because you did mention Zapier, you do work with Zapier a lot. If you were to build a simple automation, what would that look like for anyone that's listening?
Well, a few of the ones probably that are the most useful, especially for just like your average business owner, are an automation that where you can use a application to extract like the information off of a business card and put it into your CRM. Now, mine is it does a lot more than that. I think it's a 14-step zap. When I take a picture of someone's business card, it goes through and checks to see if they're in Notion because I use Notion for my CRM.
Hmm.
If they're not, then it moves forward. It puts them in Notion. Once it goes into Notion, it triggers another automation that will take that contact. It puts them in my Google contacts, puts them into my invoicing software, puts them into my. If there's a note attached, then it will write an email draft that has something to do with the note, and then
Nice.
put it into my drafts for my
So it's
email.
custom,
It
personalized.
does yeah, does a search
Mhm.
with SERP API, a Google search, finds their LinkedIn profile, scrapes all their personal information, finds out the company they work for, scrapes all the company information, puts all that back in Notion. All that happens just from taking a picture of the business card. That's
That's
it. That's all.
awesome.
And so like, and all that's on
But let me
Zapier.
ask, so that sounds beautiful. How much upkeep do you have to do? Because there's no one automation or tool that you build and
Mhm.
forget. And you'd have to go back and make sure that the connection is still there, the Google API is still working, and it didn't forget about.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah.
So do you feel like that is manageable for someone that again is not technical? They just want the solution. You build it for them, you walk away. Next thing they do something, it breaks. Is it manageable, or it doesn't need some upkeep where then it makes sense to have someone on call? Okay, this doesn't work anymore for me. Can you come and fix it?
Well, there's always this you have to measure your time against your resources. I would never recommend to anyone, if you have the resources, for you to spend the time, unless you just want to like kind of dip your feet in and get kind of a general idea of what the thing is. Let people who are good at what they do be good at what they do. Like, it's such a better high leverage activity for you to stay narrowly focused on the thing that you're good at, get better and better and better at it, and then pay other people who are also really good at what they do to do that. So, like, in one sense, I'm saying if you don't have the cash flow to hire somebody, yes, it is worth it to invest in automation and learning how to do it and building time-saving assets for yourself. I do truly believe that. If you do have cash flow, definitely offload that.
100%.
Like, pay somebody who's really, really good at it. It'll take them a fraction of the time and it'll be done way better, right? But for some of these automations, even that one, yeah, that one's super complicated, right? It's 14 steps. I'm using like webhooks and stuff in there. It's crazy. But for something really simple, like one of the most non-technical people that I know, we set up one for her that was just, she was just like, I don't know about it. Like, just calm down. And I was like, so she has HubSpot, right? And I was like, okay, very simple. We take this application, download it on your phone. Great. Hook it up to Zapier. Great. Now it's attached. Now we hook up HubSpot. Great. Now, when you take a picture of someone's business card, it puts that information into your HubSpot, and you can create all your automated
And
campaigns and
now
all
you
of
can do
your
whatever you want to do with it
exactly,
in HubSpot. Yeah.
exactly. So, like, even something that simple, anybody can do that.
Yeah.
Anybody
I
can
mean,
get on
or you could
YouTube.
go through the steps of taking a picture, going into HubSpot, taking that picture up. I don't even think you can upload it and it will automatically transfer the information. I think you actually have to manually go and
Right, they have
enter
it. Yeah,
it.
they have the technology, right? But it's like, I just want to take the picture and go away. Like, I don't
Right.
want to go to HubSpot. I just want to do it by itself.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, we talked about mindset, we talked about implementation and practical application. Now let's look ahead to what's coming next in AI in your perspective. What are some of the exciting things that you see, things that keep you up at night because you're so excited about?
Things that keep me up at night. Oh, jeez. Like recently?
It
uh,
could be recently, it could be yesterday, today, it could be tomorrow.
I think something that, well, I guess I'm in the dev world, so I'll stay away from that just because most people are not developers. There's a lot going on in that space. But I think what something that's really really exciting to me is how there are people and organizations who are like doing this thing where they're like really narrowly focusing in on one thing and getting really really good at it. And I keep finding these little gems of like either little applications or things inside of applications that are just like they solve significant problems. I think it's a really exciting thing that it's kind of like the gold rush. There's a lot of people who are still out east and they're just like, is it worth it? And I'm just like, I don't even have the time to turn around. I have so much gold in my hand. I can't even turn around to tell you about it. Like, I'm just because there's so much cool stuff happening. I think I'm really excited that people are finding and solving real problems, and they keep doing it, and like they keep iterating on it, and they keep making it better. And a lot of the problems in tech that have been around for a really long time because really big players have dominated certain spaces and not changed anything, and like a lot of the business world is sitting on top of that old technology, and for non-technical people that's really painful. Like, these
Mhm.
are the people that I build for. They're like, I use this software and I can't do anything with it. And I'm like, what is it? And they tell me, and I'm like, oh, yeah, I know about that. I'm so sorry. But now it's like we're getting to a point where we can build so much faster. Like, what used to take an entire software development team years takes me and my guys like a month or two. Like, we're getting to the point because the tools are getting so good. That's
Mhm.
really exciting to me, that because we'll be able to go to that middle level of the market. Maybe we would be willing to invest in like having some better systems, but we don't even know where to start. We're lost in this space. To be able to present options to them that actually make sense, and for those options to exist, because at the end of the day, we're all just human, right? We're gonna die, so that means that everything that happens before that kind of matters. And I don't think anybody wants to spend a whole bunch of their time doing a bunch of tedious tasks that they don't care about, things that don't make them feel alive. They're not spending time with people that they care about, or doing or following their passions, or watching their kids grow up. There are people who work so much and are so drowned in their tasks
Mhm.
that they don't have time for anything. I love that there's technology that's coming out that's making people it's actually helping people get their lives back in the form of just time. I love that.
That's
So
awesome. Well, that's exciting for sure. And we only see the foreshadow of what all of that could be because still so much more developing as we speak. I have one more question that I want to ask you, and it goes into the background that you touch on beginning of our conversation, and that is your creative background as well as your jiu-jitsu background. And because you do so many things, right? Like you stay on top of technology, and I know how much time all of that takes. Like I do a lot of things myself as well. How do you balance all of your interests? Like how do you keep yourself, I don't know if balance is the right word, honestly. I had this long rant on LinkedIn about how I don't believe in balance. But how do you integrate all of that?
I would say, if you don't want to use the word balance, I would use the word prioritization or
Mm,
priorities, because we all have the same 24 hours, right? Um, there aren't a lot of people who have empty hours to fill, which means that the only way for you to orient your life and make it look the way that you want it to look is to push things out, not add things in. Like you, because most people's time is already all the way accounted for, like all the whole 24 hours. So it's like you can't reorient your life. You can't do different things without pushing something out. And so the skill that's required to say no, or to take something that you were previously doing and stop doing that, even if it is difficult for you or someone that you know. It could be a relationship, it could be a habit, it
mhm,
could be a TV show, it could be your favorite restaurant. It doesn't matter. Like I have to ask myself every single time when I go to do something, every single time when I go spend time with somebody, I'm like, is this in line with my goals as like as a human being? Like, is this something that lines up? And if it doesn't, I just say no. And I have had to learn I would say in a not very pleasant way, to say no a lot. I say no a lot more than I say yes. But I think that something that is kind of a misnomer, something that is not thought about a lot, is that every single yes is a no to everything else. So every time when you think to yourself, like, yeah, I'll grab coffee with you, some random person I met at a networking event, does that really do anything to go towards the goals that you have in your life?
yeah.
Like, and I think those are really hard decisions because you don't always know. It's not always just a yes or no. It's a gray area. And so it's like your tolerance for how certain you have to be. You have to decide that. If you're like, I'm not really certain if this is going to be good or not, but you're like, well, if I'm not certain, it's a no. That's kind of extreme, right? But that's where I am. So
Yeah.
like, how do I have time? Like, because all the people who know me, every single time I talk to them, the only thing they say is like, "Hey, oh, I haven't heard from you in a long time." Because I only have like three really main things that I do with my life, and then when I have downtime, then I will reserve that time to kind of just do to play, so to speak. But as far as like my when I'm not playing, when it's not downtime, like I'm extremely focused. And I think that's the only way that I could do it. When
Yeah.
I started, I was doing that thing, 9 coffee dates a week, just meeting everyone who was like, "Oh yeah, I'd love to sit down with you," like, and just kind of like going all over the place and every single networking event, and not really understanding exactly what I was trying to do. I just was moving. But I don't discourage people from doing that, because the movement is how you understand what to do next. Like, don't stay still. That's your worst thing you can do. And I was like, but man, if you're looking for, like, you got to learn to say no. You got to learn to cut things out. Like, there's no other way. Unless you literally have time in your day where you're like,
Well, I'll tell you
no.
why I thought that ChatGPT was so right when it gave me
Oh,
this response
full circle.
and full circle. And it was saying, you're really trying to accomplish this 5 major life goals at the same time that I shared. And he was like, it's doable, but not if they all demand 100% effort at the same time. So, what's the main focus for this quarter? You don't need more blocks in your calendars. You need more space inside them. Not everything deserves the same intensity at once. So, what's the one thing you could scale
Oh,
back slightly to create some breathing room? So, in so many ways, saying what you're saying, right? So, I was like preaching to the choir. And I'm like, I'm going to go over there in a corner and I'm going to think on this.
well, isn't that like that's hard? It's hard. Like, basically, because like the way that it feels isn't like, oh, just let me choose one. You basically, what you're asking to do is like kill one of my dreams. You know,
Exactly.
like it doesn't feel
Exactly.
like it's just kind of like a some kind of neutral choice. It's like,
Yeah.
take this thing that you really care about, take it out behind the shed and kill it.
Exactly,
And I was
because
like,
I'm
and
like,
you'll feel better.
I'm scheduling my life to the minute. There is little no room of and no buffer. And if you
Right.
run like that, like a machine, right? And there's no reset time, eventually you're going to burn out. And eventually you're going to hit the wall. And I know that I have a really high capacity and I can push really, really hard, especially if I care about certain things. But even then, there is no room for error. There's no room for
Right.
something outside of the ordinary to happen. A flat on the highway or running out of gas for some reason almost happened yesterday. Things like that. Then now it put me late for my meeting because I didn't have 5 minutes that I had a buffer time to have to be able to stop to the gas station to fill out my car, right? So that's the kind of like tightness that's like, I am running like this is the Apollo 13 mission flying to the moon, and
Yeah.
not one screw can be slightly untied because
Yeah.
otherwise this thing is going to blow.
That is exactly it. And you know this probably in a different domain from working out.
Yeah.
Like the more the weight, the more your form matters, right? If
Okay.
you have more weight on you, you have to be that much more like lined up. You can't be squatting 300
No,
pounds
you're
and
breaking your back.
walk in and be like, hey, what's up? Like, you know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
Like,
No, there's like it
like
takes absolutely 100% focus and concentration on that. Otherwise, you're injuring yourself. Yeah, absolutely.
that's it. You're injuring yourself. That's a great way to put it. The people who are like have too many goals, like you're injuring yourself. You're crushing yourself with the weight of your own goals. And I
And
was
I'm
like,
right
takes
there. ChatGPT put me to, into the therapist chair and told me, telling you, girl, you're injuring yourself. You better stop. I'm
yeah, I mean,
I'm I'm definitely reflecting on that, and I'm like, man, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, and something's gotta give, but what will? So that brings us to the wrap up. And before we do our closing here, Noah. Well, first off, thank you for this conversation. I know we've gone a little in many different directions and we were able to touch on so many different things. But I'm curious, is there one piece of advice that you like to give to anyone that's looking to implement AI in their business or their personal workflow that you know it has worked? And then for anyone that's listening, where would you like them to connect with you to learn more about what you're doing, about some of the classes that you're putting on, workshops, all of the good stuff?
yeah. Yeah, the connection, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm not very active on my other social media currently. So yeah, LinkedIn, Noah Riley. If you search Noah Riley Boise, I'll pop up. One piece of advice, I would say probably, yeah, be curious and you gotta embrace a little bit of the pain and know that when if you go through it, you'll get what you came for. I think that the mentality is more important even than the tools that you choose.
Mm-hmm.
Like the idea that you're more curious than you are resistant, the idea that you know that you might not get exactly what you want on the first try, but you're going to keep pushing forward, that will get you way farther or way further than choosing the right tool. So I would say like examine maybe with GPT your life goals.
Your life choices.
Yeah, figure it out. What are you doing that matters so much to you? And are you willing to put in more for it? Are you willing to like reorient your priorities? Are you willing to invest into this? If you do things like get your time back, like time is the most valuable resource we have. If we can do things to get our time back, yes, like it's worth it. The tool is worth it. I would say be curious, be strong, like move forward.
I love it. Well, that was a mic drop moment right there. So thank you, Noah, again for such an inspiring conversation. Thank you, listeners, for staying all the way till the end. This is a long conversation, so you better take it in strides. Guess what? You can listen to this on your way to work or on your treadmill, working out, doing jujitsu, weightlifting, whatever it is that you want to do these days. And then if you have listened to the episode and you did like the content, here's my call to action for you. Please subscribe, leave a review, share it with your community and your network. And until next time, as both me and Noah said, stay curious, keep innovating, and keep exploring how AI can work for you. Thank you, Noah.
Yeah, thank you, Anka.
Thank you for listening to the Events Demystified podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please share it with other professionals like yourself. If you're interested in learning more about TreeFan events, including our future AI education talks and workshops, or to see how we can support your next event, book a free 20-minute consultation through the link in the episode notes. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and follow us on YouTube, Spotify, and social media for updates on future episodes, industry insights, AI news and tips, and more. And if you have any topics you'd like us to cover, feel free to reach out.